When I was growing up, one of the most important lessons that my dad ever taught me is to do a good job. Don't go quick, but just do a good job. So if you ever met my dad, he would be this tinkerer kind of person, right? Like he was always building things and doing things. He worked in a pulp and paper mill, but he was extremely creative in what he did. And when he was at home, when he worked, he worked. He was a dedicated employee. I know exactly how my dad was. He was probably one of the best employees there, never really piping up about things to his detriment. It was, he probably should have done some more piping up about things. Um, I remember this one time, just to give you an idea. So this is how much, like, this is the only time I knew that he sort of piped up and he went and actually talked to somebody there. So I just graduated as a chemical engineer in my undergraduate program from the top engineering school in Canada. And I applied to work there for the summer at this pulp and paper mill, just for a summer job. They have a summer employee program, um, that they would hire a certain number of people. And he went and I never got in for whatever reason. I don't know why. I think it was like politics, right? As everything else. Because my resume would have been far better than everybody else that was there. Because I was a chemical engineer at the top engineering school in Canada. There's nobody else doing that in my town. And I never got in. So my dad actually, he never said anything, but we eventually went and talked to the managers, and then he actually piped up, and then I got an interview, or they called me for an interview. Um, but what I didn't realize is that um, you know, coming back to this idea of who he was. Um, he would always be tinkering and making things, and a lot of the stuff in our house was always homemade. Um, you know, we he had a high school education, but that didn't stop him from anything, and we never went without. So a lot of stuff was, wooden, homemade, constructed in various different ways. He had all sorts of contraptions around that he sort of customized and built. And I didn't realize, like, man, that is highly unusual. First of all, not many people do that kind of stuff. But it was also extremely innovative. And many of those things that he built, the contraptions, he probably, if he was, entrepreneurial and he's kind of a wheeler and dealer kind of type, he probably could have sold them and made some money off of it. But that's just not who he was. So we had all sorts of things like that. But the key thing that he taught me was to just do your job, get up, um, go to work, do your job, come home. And, the longer I have been working and I bumped into people, the more that I realized that that was just extremely unusual to not want, uh, not be the type of person that is like wheeling and dealing and sort of shoving and shouldering your way to the top. Uh, it's just extremely unusual to see that where somebody was just comfortable and like worked his butt off all the time. I don't. It's hard to explain because you might think of somebody that just did work. Um, that he wouldn't be a good employee. It was the complete opposite. He was an extremely good employee. He worked at the same company for like 43 years, 43, I believe, or 48. Um, just an extremely long time, always good employee, basically doing his thing. And then when he came home, he didn't sleep a heck of a lot, but he would get up and work around the house and do things all the time. And what I didn't realize is that somebody that wasn't into all of the sort of politicking and, shoving your way to the top and, incrementally, doing things that are for your benefit and for everybody else's and taking away from everybody else's benefit. It's just extremely unusual. I think he was a very religious person, always going to church every Sunday, and that was an important part. I realize, I look back now, that that was probably more him that was driving a lot of that. That all of us, everybody had to go to church on Sunday. It was very, you know, very much like if you can imagine a 1950s kind of style person. Everything was all put in order, but that doesn't happen. Um, most people, and I try to apply the same sort of principles, right? I'm not necessarily religious anymore, but I apply the same principles that underlie a lot of that. Um, of just trying to be a good person, showing up, doing your work, going home, being a good dad in a lot of different ways. You know, there's a lot of differences between him and me in terms of what kind of a dad he was. They were always there, but they were not like involved as parents. And so I had to do a lot of stuff on my own. I had to do things be very independent. Um, but what I realize is that there's few and far between people that will, just do that. Get up and go to work and go home. And if you do that, you look unusual. You look weird. Um, and people like distrust that kind of stuff because they themselves are, distrusting that um, that I just know that people are sort of pushing and shoving to the top often. At least maybe it's the domain that I'm in. It might be sort of coloring some of that. Academia is extremely competitive in the sense that everybody wants to be at the top. Nobody actually ever is. And so everybody feels very insecure, right? Like that is a very real thing. Um, and you know, what you come to realize is that all of that stuff, right? The shoveling, like pushing your way to the top doesn't matter at the end of it. You don't really get that much further ahead, but people don't see that. If you don't play that game, there's only a rare group of people that see that. And so what I have come to realize is that I have to sort of let that group of people form around me rather than forcing any of that kind of stuff, of forcing to find people that are, legitimate, the real deal, that are willing to just work, and do their thing, and not do any of this sort of pushing and shoving and all of that kind of stuff. And it's taken me a long time to realize that it takes you can't force any of that stuff. You have to let it happen naturally, and have people sort of self-select into that, and then you forget about all of the rest of it. Um, that's it. That's what my long point is that my dad was right in a lot of ways, that he sort of managed his life, man, with how little we had and how well that they did. It was incredible. Um, Absolutely incredible. Like, we did without for a very long time with almost everything. And because of that, my mom is is she still alive? And she's doing well. She's happy and healthy. She's doing extremely well. She has nothing to worry about. And like, a lot of that is just that slow, incremental, step by step building. And once you realize that, a lot of things change in your life, that you don't have to race but do your job. You get in, you do your job, and you go home, right? Like, um, somebody had told me that's like a lunch pail kind of employee, right? Like a boots and pail employee. That's exactly it. You come in, you do your job, and you go to bed, or you go home. And the more that you become like that, you just forget about all of the rest, and you stop pushing and shoving, which you probably will not get to the top because you're not pushing and shoving, but you will have a good life, um, and you will build an extremely robust group and system around you because nobody is sort of pushing and shoving their way to the top. It makes it very, very fragile. And I see that all the time. Um, like with research papers and stuff, you could tell when somebody's sort of done it quickly and not thought through things. It's rushed. It's very fragile. That's the way I sort of think about it. And you'll see that too in the life around you. You'll see that people that sort of pushing their way to the top, they create. Yeah, it gets done, but it's extremely fragile. It's ready to break at any time, and nobody's happy in the situation. Uh, and I think that's the important thing to remember. Just keep going. One more step. Keep working. You can do this. All right. Take care. Have a wonderful day.